Okay, as far as the psychoactive mechanisms of action for cocaine, first, what we're going to be talking about are the monoamines. I mean, cocaine is mostly dopamine, but we probably want to look at the monoamines together as a category of neurotransmitters. So, cocaine blocks the reuptake of monoamines into the presynaptic neuron, increasing the amount of monoamine in the synapse, or dopamine, and it blocks sodium ion channels along the ion axon, which inhibits action potentials. So that's the analgesic anesthetic effect of cocaine there. Amphetamines, cathinone and methcathinone, like cat, cause neurotransmitters to leak into the synapse. They increase the amount of transmitter that's actually released, and they block the reuptake of monoamine into the presynaptic neuron. And there, I mean, there's really, it could be a lot of different monoamines, but mostly dopamine and norepinephrine. This is just looking at the mesolimbic system. So here you have the nucleus accumbens and the ventral tegmental area. That pathway there is the central reward pathway of the brain. There you can see cocaine and amphetamines directly increase levels of dopamine in the nucleus accumbens. All drugs of abuse will either directly or indirectly increase levels of dopamine in this area. So it activates the central reward pathways. So again, dopamine is the neurotransmitter that would be most important to look at in terms of cocaine. And cocaine, again, blocks the reuptake of dopamine, so increases the amount of dopamine in the synapse. Cocaine is metabolized to benzoyl cognine. I'm probably mispronouncing that. I've asked a handful of people how to pronounce it. I get different answers every time. So cocaine would be out of your system really pretty quickly, but in a drug test we look for the metabolite of cocaine, and that's what it is. Let's see. If we look at the chemical structure of a drug, the chemical structures don't really give us an idea of how they work. We'll look at the chemical structure of cocaine in just a little bit. The different ways of ingesting cocaine, whether it's insufflated, smoked, injected, each different pattern has a different profile of how the drug reaches peak plasma concentrations in the body. What you would want to do if you're a drug addict, I mean, obviously, again, you don't want to do this, but you want to figure out a way to maximize the absorption and distribution of the drug. And so the best way to do that is likely smoking the drug. When you look at your lungs, we've talked about this before, your alveoli, the surface area of your lungs is about 750 square feet in an adult. So the drugs enter the system by diffusion through gas exchange. There's the cocaine molecule. So we talked about the nucleus accumbens and the reinforcement model of cocaine. So if you look at reinforcement in the brain, well, one, cocaine is directly affecting the central reward pathways. So I mean, that is like as strong of a reinforcer as you can get. So it increases the dopamine within the synapse, and that's in the nucleus accumbens, a part of the mesolimbic system. Animals will self-inject all sorts of dopamine agonists directly into the mesolimbic system and the nucleus accumbens. And if you lesion the nucleus accumbens in rats, they'll stop administering cocaine to themselves. So there's also the idea that it might be negative reinforcement that maintains cocaine addictions, like when people develop tolerance, and when they stop using cocaine, they go into withdrawal. So maybe that withdrawal is like a negative stimulus, and the cocaine stops that. So it's like, think about negative reinforcement with Skinner. The best example of that is being in your car and the seatbelt thing goes off. So it's like ding, 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 ding. That's an annoying negative stimulus. To get that to go away, you put your seatbelt on, just like being in withdrawal is a negative, annoying stimulus. So when you go into cocaine withdrawal, they call it the crash. The first stage of that is depression, agitation, potentially suicidal thoughts, and fatigue. Remember that the withdrawal of any drug is almost always the exact opposite of the effects, the active effects of the drug itself. So cocaine makes you not depressed and have lots of energy. So the withdrawal is the opposite. Agitation could go either way there, so that's kind of an oddball there. But it would be more like anxiety. Might have mood swings, craving, anhedonia, and potentially obsession with getting more of the drug. And then in the extinction phase, that's when normal pleasure would return, which cues drug craving and mood swings. There are some concerns with cocaine. I mean, you can have acute cocaine toxicity, so you can overdose from acute administrations of cocaine. You could also have problems with chronic toxicity, and there is a large potential for dependence. Note that cocaine is really not life-threatening in withdrawal. The withdrawal is really not all that bad from cocaine like it would be from heroin. Heroin's not really life-threatening either, but that's just good to know. So you can reduce cocaine use by blocking dopamine receptors. What are some things that block dopamine receptors? Well, that would be like the antipsychotic drugs, but those aren't exactly fun to take. They make you feel lousy, dysphoria, and anhedonia. That's like depression. And then in the past, there's been like a lot of press about cocaine immunizations, different things like the Prometa treatment. Things like that really haven't worked very good. So we switch back into amphetamines and the Benzodrex inhaler. This is an old ad here. You can see here, this would have been in a magazine like in the 1950s. SmithKline and French Laboratories. Now that's GSK. That's a drug company. GlaxoSmithKline. That's a meth lab right there. So a lot of times students ask, what's the difference between amphetamine and methamphetamine? All it is the addition of a single methyl group to the amino group sticking off the middle carbon atom chain. That gets the molecule in your brain a little faster, makes it bind a little tighter, lasts a little bit longer. But essentially it's basically the same drug, just gets in there faster, lasts a little longer. Here, these are the effects of amphetamines. Major thing is amphetamines overcome fatigue. So, you know, when you have a society where people are chronically overworked and fatigued, amphetamines work really well. We talked about the military still using amphetamines. But in excess, they can cause anxiety, apprehension, even panic. Amphetamines work on dopamine and norepinephrine. They increase dopamine in the central reward pathway again. Sometimes amphetamines cause behavioral stereotyping, which is repetitively doing a behavior over and over and over and over again. Amphetamines are clinically used to treat ADHD, narcolepsy, even for weight loss. Not a very good choice for weight loss because of the rebound effect. Remember that ADHD and narcolepsy, amphetamines really work pretty well. So there's Adderall XR. I'm sure being a college student you've heard of Adderall. Adderall is mixed amphetamine salts. Ritalin is a little different. Ritalin is called methylphenidate. Think that Ritalin more increases dopamine. Some of the effects of amphetamines: increased heart rate, blood pressure, decreased appetite, increased respiration, insomnia, sweating, dry mouth, muscle twitching, convulsions, fever, chest pain, irregular heartbeat, and potentially death due to overdose. And then the cognitive effects are interesting too: decreased fatigue, increased confidence, increased feelings of alertness, restlessness, talkativeness, increased irritability, fearfulness, apprehension, distrust of people, behavioral stereotyping, hallucinations, psychosis. There's an interesting movie called Requiem for a Dream. Ellen Burstyn is one of the lead characters in that film. It shows her on diet drugs or amphetamines. I mean, it's an extreme portrayal, but it's a good movie. I'd recommend that. There's Andre Agassi there. Amphetamines are used in sports all the time. And Andre Agassi admitted to using cocaine during sports. I want to go back to that. So, I mean, these are really cognitive enhancing drugs. Adderall, I mean, if you're tired and you need to study, even if you don't have ADHD, it's probably going to help you, unless you have anxiety or something like that. So it could go terribly wrong. I mean, don't misquote me there. It's a bad choice, but there's lots of people that are totally normal that use these drugs just to enhance cognition, and that brings up all sorts of ethical issues. Again, we've talked about the side effects of amphetamines before. Now, in the United States, oh man, amphetamines were super popular in like the 1950s. But we saw a decline in abuse in the late 80s and early 90s, and then we had this striking increase in amphetamine use with the introduction of methamphetamines into our societies, and that was really kind of an interesting phenomenon because it really took hold in rural communities, which is kind of the opposite of most drug trends. Same as cocaine, you can have acute toxicity, chronic toxicity, and there's a large dependence potential. And this is the last slide here. Again, this is another ad for Noricidrine, which is a benzodrine inhaler. And these things were like marketed to people like crazy here for bronchospasms. So how would it treat that? Well, if you have like asthma or something and your chest tightens up, if you take a drug that's a sympathomimetic drug, it's going to open up your bronchial tube so you can breathe. Remember the fight or flight response, the sympathetic nervous system, like the slide with the grizzly bear? So once people got their hands on these things, they realized they were pretty fun to take, and they could get you high. So they really were abused at an alarming rate in the United States. And if you remember hooked illegal drugs and how they got that way, huge amounts of amphetamines were prescribed in the United States and still are today. So that's it with stimulants. There's a lot of other stimulants out there, but those are the major ones. If you have any questions, post them to Blackboard. Hope you learned something with this.